and a commitment to human rights to ensure they do not compromise privacy, due process, or fundamental freedoms. Today's discussions focus on one of the most debated applications of AI in security: facial recognition technology in mass concentration events. The use of AI-powered facial recognition systems in large gatherings, such as sporting events, concerts, political rallies, and public demonstrations, is becoming increasingly common. Governments and security agencies are adopting these technologies to enhance crowd management, identify persons of interest, locate missing individuals, and mitigate potential security threats in real time. These capabilities have already been deployed in major events. For example, at the FIFA World Cup in Qatar in 2022, AI-driven facial recognition systems were used for crowd monitoring and access control to enhance public safety. Similarly, various countries, including Japan, Germany, China, and the United States, as well as the United Kingdom, have implemented AI-powered biometric technologies in airport security, public transportation hubs, and large-scale public events to improve threat detection and to streamline security procedures. Despite AI-powered facial recognition having the potential to enhance public security, it also presents significant challenges, raising serious concerns regarding privacy, accuracy, and the potential for misuse. To prevent misuse, unlawful surveillance, and the violation of civil liberties, it is crucial to establish clear regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines for its responsible use. This meeting provides a valuable opportunity for OAS member states, security experts, and international organizations to engage in a constructive dialogue on best practices, challenges, and legal considerations in the deployment of AI-powered facial recognition technology. As a region, we must learn from successful implementations worldwide, while remaining mindful of the risks and working towards strong national regulatory frameworks that align with international human rights standards. Our discussion today will examine the role of AI facial recognition in enhancing security at mass events, best practices and lessons learned from AI deployments globally, the importance of establishing ethical and technical standards to guide AI governance, how regional and international cooperation can strengthen AI-based security frameworks. Colleagues, today's dialogue presents a unique opportunity to exchange best practices and experiences that will help member states shape responsible AI deployment strategies, strengthen strategies that not only enhance security, but also uphold our shared commitment to democracy, human rights, and ethical innovation. Let us make this a dynamic and insightful exchange that sparks meaningful progress. We move to agenda item 2, remarks by the Secretary for Multidimensional Security. I offer the floor to you now, Secretary Marquez. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Distinguished delegates from member states, colleagues from the OAS, it is a pleasure to speak to you this morning around a topic of growing importance. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence are profoundly transforming our region and our world by offering greater efficiencies and new capabilities. Their potential, quite frankly, goes far beyond what we can even begin to imagine. But at the same time, as we are all learning in diverse fora, such as this one, these same opportunities will also bring significant risks if not properly managed. Today, we have an opportunity to take a closer look at how artificial intelligence can be used to more effectively manage the organization of major events or crowded spaces and other security-related possibilities. For instance, AI can enhance physical security at mass events by improving threat detection, crowd monitoring, and emergency response. AI-powered surveillance, facial recognition, and behavior analysis can help security teams identify threats in real time, enabling rapid intervention. Automated crowd analytics can assess density and movement patterns, thereby preventing stampedes and overcrowding. And AI-driven drones and robotics can enhance perimeter security, monitor restricted areas, and assist in real-time incident management. These advancements strengthen security at major events, making them safer for attendees and staff while improving overall operational efficiency. However, integrating AI into physical security can present challenges as well. AI surveillance, including facial recognition, raises privacy and ethical concerns, requiring clear regulations to balance security with individual rights. AI systems may also produce biased results, leading to inaccurate threat detection or profiling. High costs and reliance on accurate, real-time data can limit access, especially for smaller events. And public skepticism toward AI monitoring may impact trust and compliance. Some of you may have seen examples of this recently at airports. It is SMS opinion at this stage that building physical security resilience requires integrating AI with traditional security measures to adapt to evolving threats. It also requires transparent policies, human oversight, and ethical AI development to ensure responsible implementation and public acceptance. International cooperation and policy development are key to ensuring responsible AI use, including for major events. Cross-border collaboration on AI standards, data sharing, and good practices strengthens security at major events. Investments in AI training for security personnel improves human-AI coordination. And public engagement and transparency in AI policies build trust, helping governments and event organizers maximize AI's benefits while addressing its challenges. We will hear about this and much more from our distinguished panel of speakers today. For our part, the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism, SICTE, has been a leader in addressing AI in the cybersecurity realm. The session today is one of many examples of SICTE's work to raise awareness of AI risks and opportunities in policy and governance spaces. These initiatives have fostered greater dialogue among member states and advanced the idea that regional commitment and collaboration can be powerful tools for creating a safer, more inclusive, and more resilient environment, both physically and digitally. We look forward to building on these experiences to continue to raise awareness of the impact of AI and emerging technologies across the security spectrum. I hope you find the session to be useful to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Marquez. We move to the next item on today's agenda, which focuses on the implementation of AI facial recognition technology in public security and its role in law enforcement. In that regard, we will hear from experts who will provide insights into the benefits, challenges, and responsible use of facial recognition technologies. On behalf of the committee, it's my honor to thank our distinguished guests in advance for their willingness to share their insights and experience with us on this important topic. I ask distinguished guests, where possible, to stay with us after their respective presentations so as to participate in the dialogue with member states. The first such presentation will be by Mr. Audran McCarthy, Program Management Officer and New York Liaison Officer on Artificial Intelligence, and at the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute, UNICRI. He will deliver a virtual presentation on the responsible use of facial recognition technology in law enforcement. I invite Mr. McCarthy to take the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you very much for having me join you here today. It's a pleasure. Just to confirm, I am audible, and if I could have slides brought up.
We're hearing you.
Excellent, thank you very much. And my slides are visible?
Yes, it has just
Thank you very
started.
much. So as I said, it's a distinct pleasure to be here today to join you to talk about facial recognition technology in law enforcement, specifically looking at the responsible use of this technology. And this is a topic we have been working at UNICRI for many years now, particularly in the context of our Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics, which is based in The Hague. And we're happy to share the experience and expertise we've developed. Slide, please. So facial recognition technology it's a biometrics technology. So largely it finds itself in the same category as fingerprinting technologies as well as DNA related technologies. It's a technology that is, of course, as has been mentioned in the opening of this session, a technology that has gained a lot of attention in recent years, primarily because of the potential and the opportunities it brings to the law enforcement community for faster, more accurate investigations. There's a growing interest in terms of the use of technology to be able to identify naturally criminals, fugitives, persons of interest. But I think it's also important to mention the application of the technology to identify missing persons and victims of crimes as well, which is perhaps an aspect of this that receives less attention. So broadly speaking, there's two main ways the technology is or can be applied. There's what's known as face verification, and this is essentially where you have two images. For instance, an ID card of a person, and you have another suspect image, and you're trying to match the person in the photo to the known image. This is what's known as one-to-one face verification. And then you have what's known as face identification, and this is one-to-many. And this is essentially where you're looking for an unknown face within a large database. And you're hoping to try to identify a possible match to help you identify who is this unknown face. So these are, broadly speaking, the two main uses, one-to-one and one-to-many. As I said, there's an extensive opportunity in this, the use of technology, but it also comes with significant risks, as is mentioned extensively. These have been touched upon already, so very if biometric data is not collected or analyzed in the correct manner without informed consent, there's the potential for it to violate the right to privacy of individuals. There is, of course, particularly when we talk about mass events, there's a potential, or public spaces, there is a potential for a chilling effect in terms of individuals' rights to freedoms of expression, assembly, association. Then, of course, there is the potential for bias to lead to misidentifications of persons, and potentially also even discrimination, and thereby undermining our, very fundamental principles in our legal system and the rule of law, the presumption of innocence. And finally, as has been mentioned just a few moments ago as well, there's the very, very important aspect of the detrimental effect of all of this on public trust, on law enforcement as an institution itself. Next slide, please. The potential for all these harms has led to a very heated policy discussion and debates around regulation. We've seen this play out at many different levels in the courts. For instance, there's been very notable cases in Brazil and in the United Kingdom, where the courts have particularly held that the use of facial recognition has breached certain rights and specifically called out for the prohibition on the use of technologies in these instances. We've also seen it at the national level. Governments such as the Netherlands have also specifically put in place requests for additional or heightened risk assessments or impact assessments on the right to privacy and ethical considerations in human rights before they would further authorize use of facial recognition. We've also seen it at local government level, particularly in the United States, where we've seen city governments, state governments also banning the use of facial recognition technologies in public spaces. And then finally, we've also seen it play out in the form of self-regulation, with tech sector companies opting to not sell to law enforcement agencies. Next slide, please. Just a flag, you may be aware, the AI Act was recently adopted in the context of the European Union. This is the first ever comprehensive attempt to regulate AI as a whole in terms of its risks and opportunities. It entered into force in February. The reason I'm mentioning it here is what's known as the Brussels effect, and this is essentially whereby the Act itself will be relevant as an example in terms of the development of further regulation, and also because the potential for applicability of the Act when tools or technologies developed outside of the EU concern or impact EU citizens or the data concerning EU. So what does the AI Act say about facial recognition? Well, first of all, the AI Act takes a risk-based approach in terms of the obligations for the development and use of systems. And that essentially means that depending on the level of the risk, you have certain particular obligations that are proportionate to that level. The AI Act itself does not strictly prohibit the use of what's known as retrospective or post-event facial recognition. This is primarily in the context of a law enforcement investigation where something occurs, and after the event, you're trying to investigate and identify the individual. So that particular use of facial recognition is not prohibited. But what is heavily regulated is real-time facial recognition in public spaces. And as I said, this is flagged as high risk and can only be authorized in particular cases, such as in terms of preventing, for instance, a terrorist attack. And for this, when it is permitted, the AI Act requires prior judicial or administrative authorization. So that's the legal framework from Europe. Next slide, please. Moving beyond Europe, more globally, again, coming from the United Nations, just to speak a little bit from our perspective. Within the UN, there's no official kind of binding stance, so to speak. The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has increasingly acknowledged the role and relevance of AI in this context. And there's been several specific references to facial recognition, particularly in the context of the risk of bias and the need for more governance systems or mechanisms. The High Commissioner for Human Rights has also specifically talked about it, particularly in the context of the risks of facial recognition and the slippery slope that potentially comes with it in terms of leading into mass surveillance of public spaces. A notable report in 2021 specifically flagged that in the event that we cannot ensure a specific technology will lead to the violation of human rights, then in this case, we should place a moratorium on the use of this technology. And they specifically called out remote real-time facial recognition as an example of this. So the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has specifically flagged this as an area of important concern. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit the debate. Where my organization comes into this is in the context of trying to strike a balance between the opportunities we see with the technology and the risks. The QR code on the screen will take you to a policy framework that my organization, Unicry, has developed together in partnership with Interpol, the World Economic Forum, and the Netherlands Police. And this, as I said, is really intended to find that way in between the risks and the opportunities. We hope that the guidance document we've developed will be not only an aid in terms of development of the governance systems of frameworks that are required to use the technology, but also will even be an operational guide to help law enforcement agencies actually improve their use of the technology itself. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, there are some limitations in our work that I'd like to flag, particularly given the focus of today's session on the mass gatherings and crowded spaces sort of development. Just to flag that our policy framework that we have developed is focused specifically on law enforcement investigations and specifically on the post-event investigative use. So this, as I mentioned, is the case where a crime has occurred, a suspect has been captured on an image, and we're trying to identify who that person is after the event has occurred. If you could just jump back. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. So that's the limitations. We have focused specifically on that and specifically excluded the use of real-time facial recognition, primarily because there's a lot of nuance in the uses of the technologies, and to build out something that's really tangible and operational and informative, we felt it was important to focus on a specific use case. So we focused in on the law enforcement investigative post-incident use case to be as practical as much as possible. That being said, the guidance that is contained in our framework is broadly useful to all sorts of uses of facial recognition, and also in the context of real-time facial recognition. That being said, with real-time facial recognition, you will have extra requirements and extra, care and attention would be due to particular topics such as oversight, accountability, prior authorization. But as I said, what's contained in our framework is an essential foundation that can be built upon. Next slide, please. So the framework that we've built is built around 9 principles. I won't go into the details of all of them, but just to say very quickly, they focus on everything from very, very broad kind of objectives. The first principle, ensuring respect for human and fundamental rights, necessity and proportionality. I mean, here we talk about the essential things of making sure that your uses of the technology are grounded in legal frameworks, that your data is collected and held in accordance with national law. And so on. We also have then more kind of practical, I think, guidance and recommendations, such as recommendation 3, which is focused on human oversight and accountability. Here we detail specific things like how do you build out a peer review process when you run a facial recognition search and it comes back with a potential match. How do we do a peer review? What does that peer review look like? What happens when you have, a lack of consensus among the peer reviewers? How do we approach that? So very, very practical recommendations here in terms of oversight accountability. Then we also have more technical recommendations, specifically in and about system performance. Principle number 4, also the use of probe images in reference databases. 6, how do we maintain the images? How do we make sure that we don't have, as I said before, have that violation of the right to privacy? Image and metadata integrity. Again, these are the much more technical elements. Then we also have principle number 5, which is focused on the risk mitigation strategies. Here we believe that there's 2 main elements. There's a requirement, or there should be a requirement from our perspective in terms of having an ex-ante evaluation of the technology that should be conducted by the developers of the technology. And then you also have an ongoing requirement on the law enforcement side of it to have an ex-post evaluation or an ongoing basis to understand the efficacy and the impact of the technology. This ex-post evaluation, I think, is very much linked with the final principle, number 9, on transparency. This is something we really very much encourage, transparency around how the technology is used. When we go back to that point of the potential impact on public trust, the importance of law enforcement being open about how it uses the technology, what are the use cases it uses, and what are the reference databases it's referring to, just to avoid that chilling effect on public trust. And then just one last principle I'd like to flag: training of facial examiners. Principle number 8. This is something that has been absolutely crucial for us. We did a lot of close engagement with law enforcement agencies using the technology, and we found a lot of inconsistency in terms of how facial examiners are trained. Sometimes they're professional facial examiners. Sometimes they're law enforcement agencies, law enforcement officers who are assigned the role of running the facial recognition search. We have different degrees of training. We have people who've been trained for 1 day on the use of the technology, but not necessarily the potential harms that come with the technology. We have people who've been trained for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So what we've seen is a lot of inconsistency. So really what we encourage is the development of a holistic training package for facial examiners, and that the only ones be authorized to use the technology themselves be trained facial examiners. So it's a key point for us. Next slide, please. And I know I'm behind in time, so I'll just wrap up very quickly. Just to say that our facial recognition, could I just jump back 1 slide, please? Just to say our policy framework has been tested, and we work closely with the agencies on screen. So the Brazilian Federal Police, Gendarmerie Nationale in France, the French Judicial Police, the Swedish Police, the Netherlands National Police, and the New Zealand Police, to take our framework and to see, is it practical from an operational perspective in their agencies? is this something that they can work with to allow them tap into the positive potential and minimize the risk? We received a lot of feedback, and we tailored our framework according to the feedback we received for them. And I think we found something that's really, from a law enforcement perspective, is really practical. So next slide, please. In the interest of time, I will skip this one and just jump onto the very last slide, please. Yeah, just here. Just to say again, I've spoken about facial recognition, taking it beyond specifically facial recognition, just to flag to your attention another document or set of documents we've been working on at UNICRE together with Interpol, which is the Toolkit for Responsible AI Innovation in Law Enforcement. This is essentially what we believe is the blueprint for responsible AI innovation within this community. Everything from what you need to understand about the technology, what is it in a technical level, what are the principles of AI in law enforcement, how do we measure risk, how do we measure our own organizational readiness to use a technology like this. So for anybody out there whose agencies in their countries are looking to explore this technology, I would highly encourage you to pay reference to this, and please do feel free to reach out if you have any need for information. Next slide, please. And that is all I have. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Mr. McCarthy, I thank you on behalf of the committee for your very interesting presentation on the responsible use of facial recognition technology in law enforcement. Thank you very much. I hope you can stay around in case there are questions that member states would like to pose to you. We move from facial recognition technology in the realm of law enforcement to the next presentation titled The Impact of Facial Recognition at Major Sports Events, Council of Europe, the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence. For this presentation, I'm pleased to offer the floor to Mr. Peter Kimpian, Secretary of the Committee of the Council of Europe Privacy and Data Protection Convention, Convention 108. Mr. Kimpian, welcome. Please proceed.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be with you today. I maybe pause here a bit because I hear a really bad echo. Can you hear the echo in the room, or it's just me?
You sound perfectly fine on this end.
Right, okay. So I carry on. So thank you so much for the invitation. So there are three topics I wanted to discuss with you today. One is, as you mentioned, Convention 108, for which I'm the secretary, and you might be also interested in, as this is a data protection convention, which created at the Council of Europe in the 70s and late 70s, but this is an open convention, and till date it's the only convention which is a multilateral international convention on the right to privacy and the protection of personal data. Till date, we have gathered 55 parties who has joined this convention, so it's really going way beyond of Europe and the member states of the Council of Europe. And we are working with 36 observers regularly. One of them is OAS, so I'm very happy that we can strengthen our cooperation also with this committee and on these topics. I must also mention that, as you might have already guessed, that the convention, international convention, which is based on the Vienna the law of treaty, developed in the 80s, how it's relevant in technology such as, and I want to inform you that the convention is expressly has been modernized in 2011. So the process started in long years, especially taking into account all the initiatives and all the considerations that might come with new technologies and new developments in the world of protection of private life and the data protection. One of them, of course, that you all have heard about it, but the European Union initiatives of regulatory initiatives, that the GDPR, which we fully also into our convention, ensuring high opportunities, because we share 27 member states, the two organizations, and also because we believe that these standards should be adhered to and applied all over the world as right to privacy, the universal human rights. And with that, and as I mentioned, the framework committee that is working on the implementation of the convention landed in a very challenging task of giving some guidelines, developing guidelines of very new technology that we have been informed of. It started to be used, and as previous speakers also allowed it to, they're already very controversial on facial recognition and the right to privacy and data protection. So in 21, on 28th of January, we were very happy to publish these guidelines, where the guidelines basically gave a kind of complex in definitions what facial recognition is, defining that was an automatic processing of digital images from individuals' faces for identification and verification. So we touched upon those two purposes for the data processing of individual face templates. And the previous speaker very well described how this works and how the technology works. So I will not spend much time of it. We immediately realized that the use of this technology are many and varied, and some of them can seriously infringe the rights of the subjects, as we have a list of rights defined in our conventions very well, and widely recognized also in other, the more than 156 data protection legislation all around the world. So for example, integrating facial recognition technologies to existing surveillance systems poses a risk, a serious risk, to the right to privacy and the protection of personal data, as well as to other human rights, since the use of these technology do not always awareness, cooperation of individuals that are consent or any transparency. And the is working and fed by data of individuals and that are processed. Considering, for instance, accessing digital images of individuals on the internet. So in that, after realizing this, the committee started working on the guidelines and adopted a set of reference measures in governments, facial recognition developers and manufacturers, service providers, and entities using facial recognition should adhere to, which should follow, not to adversely affect human dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedom of any person, including the right to protection of personal data. So, what are the main building blocks of this guidelines? I won't go through all of them, but just to mention some of them which are very, very relevant in monitoring or using facial recognition, if at all, for sports events, for security of sports events. First and foremost, we need to understand that biometric data are usually acknowledged and viewed as sensitive data, or how we call in our convention, special category of data, where a list of data which we categorize as such, which are touching on the very intimate identity of person, revealing sexual, political opinion, religious beliefs, and so on and so forth. And the biometric data, which can uniquely identify a person, also belongs to these categories of data, which has been added to this list very recently during the modernization process I mentioned, along with the general data. So here we speak about special categories of data and why it is important. It is important because 108 Plus Convention requires that for the processing of personal special categories of data, the data controllers need to put in place an appropriate level of protection that also goes for normal categories of data, but which complementing those and goes beyond the simple measures or established for normal words of data. So,
Mr. Kimpian, may I interrupt you briefly? Mr. Kimpian?
More and put additional measures.
He's not wearing the headphones.
Put additional measures before starting processing of this data. The committee in the guideline, certain uses for facial recognition technologies should be banned. For instance, in order to any risk of discrimination, it recommends prohibiting the use of facial recognition for the sole purpose of determining a person's skin, color, religious or other belief, sex, racial or ethnic, age, health, or unless appropriate supports are provided for by law. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, presenting a use case for that, because there are two things. One, why this very radical position. And normally, the committee is not suggesting to have a ban on technologies. On the contrary, it tries to give guidance how to use technologies. And this is a suggestion not to use for this type of data and for purposes that could lead very discrimination, because we are speaking about a very specific type of data, which is our face. So we can very easily understand that when a data occurs our phone numbers or email addresses, this is tragic, and it can lead to very bad consequences. We can easily change the service provider or change an email address, but we will not be able to change our face. And if there's a misuse or any security breach in that related to the use of this, it would be really detrimental for individuals. So this ban should also apply to affect recognition technologies, which can identify emotions to be used to detect personal traits, inner feelings, mental health of workers engagement, since they pose important risks in fields such as employment, access to insurance, or education. So in that sense, the guidelines call upon the developers, manufacturers, and service providers that they should ensure very high quality of data and algorithms used. Also, they need to make sure that the reliability of the tools are perfect and without doubt, as well as data security, which needs to be state-of-the-art measures put in place. And therefore, there has been also some thoughts given about the education of users and raising the awareness of the very high potential and intrusiveness of this technology. So entities that are using facial recognition technologies were suggested to comply with applicable data protection legislations, and not to forget to think about before the use of facial recognition technology that data protection legislation should be adhered to, and check whether legitimacy of the processing, transparency, measures, the fairness, accuracy, accountability principles, the data minimization, limited retention period, data security are all met, and proper privacy, if not human-centered assessment, are carried out. Finally, there is also a chapter on the rights of individuals. I will not list all of them. Article 9 of Convention 8 plus make a good list that gives really potential for data subjects to remain in the control of data, but these data subjects' rights needs to be put in place and also ensured for data subject. So we also conscious. I am also conscious of the time, so I'm just going to a very recent use case, which I just wanted to present very briefly to the facial recognition discussions, or the use of facial recognition discussion for the Paris Olympics. And we have had our regular members who made a very thorough report to the committee about the discussions and the decisions that after came out, which was very much aligned, even I would say went further in terms of rigorousness and seriousness than the guidelines that we developed at the committee level, because the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, considered that facial recognition systems, although it was suggested to be used for a very high security events such was the Paris Olympics, with many challenges for security and for the risk and risk mitigation, but nevertheless, they said that the potential risk from unprecedented surveillance and risk of undermining anonymity in the public sphere are too high, and the unique identification of individuals by particularly sensitive and permanent data, which is the face, are unusual type of data to base security measures on, and an imperfect bias technology in their risk, right, according to gender, skin color, for example, was also deemed very debatable and very is a matter of a source of concern. So therefore, the decisions, after all, with the Data Protection Authority, in consortium with the Data Protection Authority, and their advice was to use not facial recognition cameras during the Paris Olympics, but augmented cameras. And the augmented cameras, and I'm really summarizing what I wanted to say, that only 8 events it could detect only 8 events, not the face of person, but the presence of abandoned objects, the presence or use of weapons, the failure of a person or vehicle to follow the common direction of traffic, the crossing or presence of a person or vehicle in a prohibited or sensitive area, the presence of a person on the ground following a fall, a crowd movement, to high density of people and start of fire. So these were the events that the camera was trained to track, and facial recognition at the end was not used at the Paris Games and for the security of the Paris Games. So with that, I really thank you for your attention. Sorry for just passing the time a bit. Of course, open for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kimpin. I wanted to draw to your attention that as your discourse went on, it became increasingly difficult to understand everything that you were saying. In that regard, I hope that you are in a position to share your thoughts with us, perhaps through a document in writing that we can distribute, so that we can appreciate in full the context of your comments with us today. Notwithstanding, I am very pleased on behalf of the committee to extend thanks to you for your insights on the experience of the Council of Europe on this issue, particularly regarding Convention 108. Thank you very much. We hope that you will stick around just in the event there are questions for you as we move on in today's session. Thank you. For the next presentation, I'm pleased to offer the floor to Mr. Callistus Joseph, Acting Assistant Director, Policy, Strategy, and Innovation of the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, CARICOM Impacts. He will speak on balancing security and rights, the responsible use of AI and facial recognition in public safety. I'm delighted to offer the floor. Please proceed.
Hello, Ms. Chairman, Chairman of the Committee on Security, Ambassador Jacinth Henry Martin, Permanent Representative of St. Kitts and Nevis to the OAS, Secretary for Multidimensional Security, Mr. Ivan Marquez, fellow presenters. From the outset, allow me to thank the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States for inviting CARICOM Impacts to deliver a presentation. English representatives, colleagues. It's an honor to address today on a matter that stands at the intersection of technology, security, and human rights. The use of artificial intelligence for facial recognition in mass events. Artificial intelligence is reshaping the security landscape in ways once confined to science fiction. AI-powered facial recognition offers a revolutionary tool to enhance public safety at mass events, whether at sporting arenas, international summits, or large-scale cultural celebrations and festivals, such as carnivals. AI-powered facial recognition technology presents us with new technologies to enhance security efforts, improve situation awareness, and support law enforcement in real-time identification of threats. But the question before us is not whether we should use AI. The question is, how do we ensure that AI rather than control them? How to make AI support against rights? CARICOM Impacts approaches this discussion with a deep understanding of AI in law enforcement. In a security institution, we recognize that technology must be harnessed with precision, with accountability, with humanity. Excellencies, we must be clear-eyed about the power and the peril of technology. Yes, AI can quickly identify persons, locate missing individuals, and strengthen crowd monitoring networks, enhance border security, and support law enforcement in ways never before possible. But we must not be blinded by the progress. Without safeguards, AI can become a force of unchecked surveillance, a mechanism for discrimination, and an enabler of mass violation of privacy. We must confront AI systems only as good as the data they are trained. Studies show facial recognition misidentifies individuals at disproportionately high rate based on race, gender. This is not just technological flaw, fundamental injustice. AI must work for all, not against some. 2, privacy and oversight. The deployment of AI in security raises serious ethical concerns. If biometric data is collected without stringent safeguards, it can be hacked, exploited, or weaponized against the very citizens it was meant to protect. Who owns this data? Who has access? Who ensures its responsible use? These questions must be answered before AI is widely deployed, not after.
Colleagues,
To suppress dissent, silent opposition,
we have requested
or
that
erode civil
the
liberties.
connection be
The
cut
power of
entirely
AI
so that we
must
can
remain
speak to
under
him,
the control
and
of laws,
we have this
not
restarted.
ambitions.
And so we're
Colleagues,
kind of working on that at the
CARICOM has not
moment.
been
Please bear with us. What we're trying to do is to reestablish connection, and this time to let him know what he needs to do to avoid the challenges that we're facing right now. It's no sense to go back through 10 to 15 minutes of this without anyone understanding. So we're really just making the effort to correct the situation so that this is of value to us. How was your day? So quiet, I just felt the urge to say something.
good day, Chair.
Mr. Joseph, are you hearing us?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yes, I just want to explain what happened. You actually were disconnected from our end. We had tried to reach out to you that many of the persons sitting in the permanent council could not understand what you were saying. And so we could not get that message to you. And so what we tried to do is to interrupt the connection so that we can speak to you and that you understood what was going on. I understand that the connection is quite weak. And one of the recommendations that I'm no techno whiz myself, but one of the recommendations we just had is that perhaps if you turned off the camera, it would be clearer when you spoke. We enjoyed having you on our screen, but apparently this would facilitate and add greater value to the experience here. So I'm going to ask you now if you can. I think we got most of it, but maybe if you can go back maybe to the last page you were on and restart, that would be quite helpful. Thank you so very much for your patience and understanding.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm still getting an echo, so I get more than just my band. I have the issue the presenter earlier has. Please let me know if you are hearing me properly, Ambassador.
Well, just now that came out rather, fine, but we have seen this before with the speaker before you. We hope it will continue. Is there any way for you to be hearing us while you're speaking? Because if it does get, nebulous for us, if it's all cloudy and we can't understand, we're going to have to indicate. But I just want to know whether you are able to hear while you're speaking.
Yes, I can hear. The unfortunate thing is that I'm getting an echo similar to the last speaker.
Okay, we're not hearing the echo for now on this side, but I would love to be able to tell you if that situation deteriorates. So
Okay,
could you please proceed, and I will be sure to point out if we can't hear.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you too.
And, apologies to all distinguished delegates. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a challenge on my side or on, it's just a technological science challenge. Distinguished delegates, it is an honor again to address you today on this matter that stands at the intersection of technology, security, and human rights, which is the use of artificial intelligence for facial recognition in mass events. As stated earlier, artificial intelligence is reshaping the security landscape in ways once confined to science fiction. Today, AI-powered facial recognition offers a revolutionary tool to enhance public safety at mass events, whether it's at sporting arenas, international summits, or large-scale cultural celebrations. AI-powered facial recognition technology presents us with new opportunities to enhance security efforts, improve situation awareness, and support law enforcement in real-time identification of threats. But the question before us is not whether we should use AI. The question is, how do we ensure that AI serves the people rather than control them? How do we make AI a shield against threats rather than a sword against rights? CARICOM Impacts approaches this discussion with a deep understanding of the potential and the perils of AI in law enforcement. As a regional security institution, we recognize that technology must, with precision, with accountability, and with humanity. Excellencies, we must be clear-eyed about both the power and the peril of facial recognition technology. Yes, I can quickly identify persons of interest, locate missing individuals, and strengthen crowd monitoring. It can help us stay ahead of criminal networks, enhance border security, and support law enforcement in ways never before possible. But we must not be blinded by the glow of technological progress. For without the right safeguards, AI can become a force of unchecked surveillance, a mechanism for discrimination, and an enabler of mass violation of privacy. We must confront three critical challenges. 1, bias and fairness. AI systems are only as good as the data they are trained on. Studies show that facial recognition identifies individuals at disproportionately high rates based on gender, race, and ethnicity. This is not just a technological flaw. It is a fundamental injustice. AI must work for all of us, not against some. 2, privacy and oversight. The deployment of AI in security raises serious ethical and legal concerns. If biometric data is collected without stringent safeguards, it can be hacked, exploited, or weaponized against the very citizen it was meant to protect. Who owns this data? Who has access? Who ensures its responsible use? These questions must be answered before AI is widely deployed, not after. 3, democratic integrity. AI must never be used to suppress dissent, silent opposition, or erode civil liberties. The power of AI must remain under the control of laws, not ambitions. Distinguished delegates, CARICOM has not been a passive observer in this global debate on AI and security. Through CARICOM Impacts, we are actively shaping discussions on the responsible use of AI in law enforcement. In 2023, CARICOM took a bold and uncompromising stance by adopting the CARICOM Declaration on Autonomous Weapons System, a landmark declaration on AI governance in security application. This declaration sets clear, ethical, and legal principles that should guide today's discussion. 4 key principles stand at the heart of the CARICOM Declaration. 1, human oversight is non-negotiable. AI must complement, not replace, human decision-making. 2, transparency and accountability must be guarded. The use of facial recognition technology must be governed by clear laws, subject to oversight and accountable to the public. Citizens must never live in fear of invisible surveillance. 3, bias and discrimination must be eliminated. AI-driven security solutions must be trained on diverse, representative data sets to ensure fairness and accuracy across all populations. And 4, international cooperation is essential. The challenge posed by AI do not stop at national borders. Member states must work together with shared principles, best practices, and mechanisms for oversight. Given the transnational nature of security threats, harmonized regulations and information sharing mechanisms will be key to ensuring the effective and lawful use of AI. CARICOM Impacts has gone beyond policy advocacy and normative frameworks. We have taken practical steps to build awareness, strengthen law enforcement capacity, and set regional norms on AI use in security. But our work is far from over. A key consideration for AI deployment in law enforcement is cybersecurity and data protection. Strict data retention policies and cybersecurity protocols must be in place to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive biometric information. CARICOM Impacts has been at the forefront of strengthening regional cybersecurity and cyber defense. The CARICOM Impact Cyber Fusion Unit, established on February 1st, 2024, and housed at the Regional Fusion Center in CARICOM Impacts, is dedicated to protecting the region's critical infrastructure, promoting trust and cooperation, and enhancing the overall cyber resilience of CARICOM member states. The Cyber Fusion Unit leads the CARICOM region's effort in cybersecurity, cybercrime investigation, diplomacy, and defense, incorporating crucial elements of awareness and capacity building to ensure a comprehensive and proactive approach to regional cyber resilience. Excellencies, history has showed us that technological revolution without efficacy lead to unintended consequences. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era, one where AI can either protect or infringe, enhance or oppress, strengthen or undermine. Let us not be remembered as a generation that enabled mass surveillance under the guise of security. Let us be the leaders who build a future where security, freedom, and responsibility walk hand in hand. I urge this body to consider the CARICOM Declaration of Autonomous Weapons System as an important reference point in our collective effort to establish strong, accountable, and fair AI policies in law enforcement and public safety. CARICOM Impact stand ready to continue this dialogue, to share our expertise, and to contribute to the responsible deployment of AI-powered security solutions that respect the rule of law, protect civil liberties, and enhance public safety. I look forward to today's discussion and to a future where AI-driven security measures reinforce rather than erode our shared democratic values. I thank you.
Mr. Joseph, thank you again for your patience and particularly for your informative presentation on the responsible use of AI and facial recognition technology in public security. We trust that we can continue to count on your presence with us to respond to any comments or questions from member states. We will now hear from Mr. Fadi Kanan, co-founder and head of strategy and business development of Eagle AI. He joins us virtually and will share insights on AI-powered crowd management. I am delighted to offer the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, delegates, also hear an echo, so try to fight that. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Hearing you, the technical advice I have been receiving is that if you begin to hear an echo, could you kindly turn down the volume on your end? But we are hearing you clearly. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'm told I could share my presentation from my end, unless it becomes problematic, then maybe we can share from the team's end. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it is visible.
Perfect. Let's make sure this is good. Okay. All right, just a second. Okay, perfect. Just to double check, can everyone still see my screen?
Yes, we're seeing.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. Madam Chair, once again, Excellencies, delegates, thank you for having me. So my name is Fadi Kanan, and I am the co-founder of Eagle AI. So opposite to some of the discussions that already happened, I reside on the academic and private sector seat of this discussion. But obviously, I think it's very important for us to all be here and we'll have this conversation together. So I'm going to be walking you through real quickly what we do really and the work we do in crowd management and in facial ID, and then some of the case studies and some of the uses that we've already had, and how obviously this relates to you all here and OAS member states. So, I mean, I think maybe I could perhaps cruise by this one real quickly. Obviously, I think everyone here is aware of the problems that we have with crowd management and public safety failures all around the world. So my background is in a bit of law enforcement. So I worked at Interpol and in other agencies, and this was something that we obviously saw often. This map here that you see, it's actually points where deadly crowd incidents happened because of inefficient crowd management. You know, whether it was overcrowding or stampedes, bad evacuation and disorder and violence. So this is obviously something that we saw a lot all over the place, and this is where the idea for Eagle AI came up, and I was working with my co-founder who's an academic at LSE, and this is where we came up with the solution. So basically what EAI does is we plug into CCTV footage or drone footage or satellite data, and we can monitor, count, map, 3D model, predict, and manage crowds. Now, not to be stepping on all the ethical toes that we obviously were just covering, this is done in a specific way, which I will show very shortly, where every single person that we are actually monitoring, we actually have no idea who they are, and it's purely in terms of counts. So I'll display that very quickly. But just before I do that, I'll also add a big part of the work that we do comes straight out of research and academia. So half of our organization is obviously the commercial side that does this. The other half is purely research. So just to make sure that we're always on top of our game in terms of algorithms and in terms of ways that we do things. So this is a very quick technological breakdown of really how it looks. So obviously this is in Mecca, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So in the first screen, it's the raw footage, so you monitor the crowd. The second one is where we start to count the crowd, so we can know how many people are in a certain place at a certain time. And the third one, we map it. The fourth one, it becomes a model. And this is where we really have, and this is, I think, some of the most important things that we've had with a lot of the law enforcement agencies we have a prediction model. So the prediction model can tell you ahead of time before basically something bad happens. So we have a forecast model that's based on machine learning algorithms. And based on this model, you can have decisions that would show up to the security stakeholders so that they can take action, allocate resources, do whatever they need basically in order to avoid that problem. I'm gonna try to play this video. I'm not sure if it'll work here. Okay, it does, great. So this is obviously raw footage from Mecca. If everyone can have a look at the bottom right corner, you can see the count. So that's a live count of how many people are in that frame. This is where we create the 3D model, the digital twin, and we can predict based on crowd dynamics and crowd movement, what if something bad's gonna happen. And then obviously that's translated into decision-making that goes back to the security stakeholders or the law enforcement agency that's ready on standby so that they can either, so here it says, open other points to divert, to avoid overcrowding, to avoid some kind of problem. So, and this is maybe one of the most important parts here. So we had this issue that there's obviously a lot of problems around, facial recognition, and there's different legal implications around the world. So we try to come up with a solution where we actually don't collect or know anything about the person other than the second they enter the premise, wherever we are, we allocate a specific PIN or like a number, an ID number to them. And that's how we know who they are and where they go. So that eliminates a lot of the problems, obviously, with bias and with having to look at different demographics of the person. We simply have their existence becomes a dot on a map, and it has a specific identifier, and that's it. So these are the different sectors that we work with, obviously public, private, and insurance. And before I jump into this specific example of some of the work we're doing in the UK, we obviously had the issue where we'd be in a specific event where a person does become a person of interest, right? But since we have them down as a number basically on our map, a point, we could track and then later apprehend. This was what we were doing in the UK. So we were doing a lot of work with the Manchester Police in their stadiums, and in the Manchester City United Stadium. And we also, through a lot of the trials with them, then ended up doing some stuff on protests. So we'll get to that shortly. And then we kind of spread all over the UK, and we're doing all kinds of things with different people. And I wanted to show maybe a little bit of what that looks like here, so everyone can have a better idea. Oops, there we go. I think we'll turn on. There we go. So, this is there we go. So this, for example, is a back and forth. My apologies. And there we go. So this here is a parade. So it's a football parade. This is from drone footage, actually. It seems like my screen has, there we go. So it's from drone footage, live footage that we had received from the police that fed into our system and back to them. This is from like a food market outside of one of their universities as well. So that from a drone as well, so that they could keep, basically keep tabs on everyone and understand how many people were in and out. It seems to be lagging a little bit. Let's see. Apologies for the lag. Perhaps I'll just skip the video since it's perhaps a bit heavy for the bandwidth. Yeah, let's do that. Apologies again. Let me just make sure it stops and we can jump forward. maybe I'll just stop sharing and then we can come back in. So anyways, as I was saying, we tested it basically on different applications, on protests and on football games, on stadiums, on matches, on tournaments, on all kinds of things. And one of the things that we were able to always do is tell the police where all people were at all times, for safety reasons, obviously, and also in case anything came up and anything was alarming. And one of the things that we were also able to do, I think, which was also very important for the police and law enforcement, we were able to tell them at all times how many people there were, and also how many law enforcement or how many security staff there were at the same time. Because obviously different countries have different norms. And for example, in a protest, for every 10 protesters, you need to have at least one officer or one security staff. So from live drone footage, we could instantly report back and tell them, for example, this is a problem. There's too many people here. You need to allocate resources accordingly to different places. So my screen has. Okay, there we go. We're back. So then we shifted to the US and we started doing some work in the US. And obviously there are different laws when it comes to facial recognition. In the UK, it's legal, but there's a lot of restrictions. In the US, also legal, also restrictions, but a bit more lenient. And based on a lot of the demand as well, we basically just overlaid facial ID into the system. So it does what it does quite accurately in terms of, localizing people and knowing where they are. And then when there is a need by law enforcement, then we were able to turn that into basically, recognizing who the person was and cross-checking with local law enforcement. So there's another video, I'm gonna skip that so we don't fall back on the same issue. So how this all relates, obviously, to OAS members, member states. A major part, I think it was 22% of all major events happen in OAS member states, but that doesn't come at the exception of some of the incidents also that took place. And I think between religious events, cultural celebrations, and sporting events, and these high density urban areas, there truly is a lot of risk when it comes to crowd management and public safety. And using tools like the tool we have, and in general technologies where we do combine machine learning algorithms, AI, and facial recognition, and AI-powered facial recognition, it can really help. And we've seen, at least from some of the work that we've done, we've decreased incidents by 34%, which really has a ripple effect, whether it was through helping in access control, search and rescue, preventing incidents, and allocating resources accordingly. We were really able to reap benefits that ended up saving lives, saving lots of resources as well, and helping those security stakeholders or law enforcement to better plan and better understand crowd movement and crowd safety. That would be the end of my presentation. I apologize again for the slight technical difficulties and delays, but I appreciate everyone's patience, and I'm more than happy to take questions during the discussion. Thank you so much.
I join with the committee in thanking you too, Mr. Keenan, for sharing with us your insights and experience on the use of AI in crowd management. Having heard these insightful and thought-provoking presentations, I'm now pleased to offer the floor to any delegations that may wish to comment or to ask questions of the presenters on today's deliberations. The floor is now open, and I'm pleased to recognize the delegation of Mexico. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The organization of large events, grandes eventos, certainly offers on any host country a wonderful opportunity to share their views, their organization, and other regional multi-sectoral elements with a view to avoiding any danger, any threat before or during the events. As you may know, Mexico will be one of the headquarters for the World Cup, the Soccer Cup that will be held in North America. And to that extent, we most assuredly recognize the importance of sticking together, putting our heads together, and strengthening all of our own respective national strategies precisely for the prevention and necessary response to any danger in events that are multi-sectoral and involving multiple places, headquarters, or places for the events. We have met with the Executive Secretary for Against Anti-Terrorism, the NOIS thing, SICTE, because as you may know, there is a program that's focused on major events that is most useful. The high-level major events that involve questions involving disarmament, security, and working against anti-terrorism is a very good manner in which to put our heads together and to prevent and do anything possible to minimize the possibility of danger arising in this kind of event of whatever nature. Dear colleagues, Mexico here takes the opportunity to affirm its commitment to work with all of the innovative tools that have been developed, including various aspects of artificial intelligence, precisely to reduce security risks at major events. New technologies in this context will indubitably contribute to further development of such technologies and therefore greater safety for us all. Thank you.
Daniels. The chair recognizes the delegation of Panama.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by offering my very sincere appreciation to all of the panelists. Very interesting statements. Panama certainly recognized how important it is to value and to incorporate advanced technologies like AI, most especially in the context of multifaceted large events. We know that artificial intelligence offers different means by which certain dangers can be avoided, and also to identify where people who have gone missing or whom one is looking for might be located. There are innovations in that regard. We know it in Panama, for instance. We have developed different systems of facial intelligence that are particularly useful in buildings of high traffic, where we have any number of different cameras connected in different places, which, as you can imagine, track visitors and therefore bolster security measures. We also, of course, avail ourselves of different elements involved in artificial intelligence, including most certainly the strategic placement of this equipment and how high. Also, frankly, operative efficiency. All of that said, and as developed as that technology may be, we do recognize that there are human rights elements that we must defend. Privacy, personal data, avoiding any kind of bias or discrimination by the use of artificial intelligence are very high on the list of those watch out elements. Facial intelligence through artificial intelligence is something that we need to be very much aware of in the ethical context. We think, therefore, that best practices must be thought of. And to that end, let's look at what we've learned and what we can learn further together. We hereby commit to using artificial intelligence as a safety measure while always respecting the human rights of the locals and the visitors. Thank you.
Delgado. The delegation of Chile is recognized.
Muchas gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to very warmly greet you and greet Secretary Marquez, Ms. Alison Teppel, and all of the present visitors, experts, and others whom we have the pleasure of seeing more often. The statements, the input has been, I think, very enriching. We can all learn more and certainly consider carefully what all of this means. Chile finds that this dialogue is most particularly salient with regard to the use of facial intelligence in massive events, control of access when there is a large concentration of human beings sounds good. However, it is true that privacy and the prevention of discriminations of various sorts must also be borne in mind. Therefore, we have here a good example of a key weapon by which we can avoid a problem that might arise in events of massive confluence. But again, there has to be care taken to avoid that vulnerable groups are exploited and, to the contrary, are protected. From Chile's perspective, and others have already pointed to this, there are a number of elements that we do well to consider. Again, the use of technology in those massive events should consider the following. The use of personal data has to be very, very controlled. There has to be a series of mechanisms of transparency and supervision to ensure that biometric data, for instance, is not exploited. Secondly, there are studies that show that facial identification is not perfect. There can be errors, particularly in the case of women and minority groups. The technology must also be regularly audited precisely in order to avoid bias from an algorithmic standpoint. Thirdly, this sort of technology should only be used when it is warranted. Indiscriminate use can and probably will lead to discrimination. The question of accountability is also a serious element. This technology must fall within the four quarters of international human rights standards. This we all have to monitor. Fifthly, interoperability and international standards. In fact, I've already mentioned that. I won't repeat it. But the use of facial recognition through international instruments needs to be carefully monitored and be to the level of what the United Nations, OECD, and UNESCO employ. What progress have we achieved in Chile? Well, we think we have a regulatory framework that helps us using facial recognition in an ethical and responsible manner. We're just at the first level of constitutional review of this law to establish fundamental rights, transparency, protection of personal data, and other elements, positively and explicitly forbidding such elements as arbitrary discrimination. This kind of intelligence must also bear in mind the standards of human rights and always the avoidance of bias across society. As regards the paper, or the role rather, that the OAS should play in our judgment, well, frankly, this is the ideal forum in which to discuss these matters so that we decide collectively as well as individually what all of this means and what facial recognition and what kind of collective responsibility we have at the international level. We think that our joint and several work and our ongoing discussion of these matters will be good for us all. It is thereby, we think, that we can protect the fundamental rights of our citizens and try to spot and eke out bias to begin with. Human rights is the name of the game. We're very pleased to contribute in any way we can on the basis of our experience to ensure that the use of AI in the region is as safe as possible. And next time we meet, we'll tell you more. Thank you.
The delegation of Guatemala is recognized.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chair. We are very pleased to have Diego Martes with us, multidimensional security, and also Ms. Treppel, and all the other colleagues that honor us with their presence today. We're particularly pleased to have this special session on the use of AI for recognition of people's faces in multi-sectoral events. Everyone has contributed something useful to the subject and to our understanding of it. Every one of the speakers, I think, have added to that understanding. This is a world of constant evolution and growing risk. It's just the way it is. So what we're going to have to do, particularly in the face of massive public events, is be careful. Now, here is a forum in which we have the opportunity to put our heads together and to identify particularly what the major security factors are in this kind of context. And facial recognition is most assuredly, as everyone has noted, an important element to counter those risks. The impact of artificial intelligence, however, must also be carefully evaluated, because any tool that is based on artificial intelligence must perforce follow the basic rules that have been established internationally for their widespread application. Guatemala, for its part, thinks that these clear parameters really apply to the design, the manufacturing, the design of autonomous elements to these systems, so that both those who have developed the systems as well as those who are using them have to have an input on how they are indeed employed, certainly also at the international level. My country believes that it is quite urgent that an international legal framework should be carefully considered on the matter. Guatemala would hope that this be done in a collaborative manner with due respect to human rights and always remembering peace and stability. That is how we can tap the use of artificial intelligence for pacific means and in a collective manner that will benefit us all. Distinguished Chair, while it is true that we have such spaces such as this one, which are very, very useful, I think we also need to consider this digital field from the standpoint of the countries themselves. The region should tap the advances of these points from an ethical and responsible and sustainable use so that we can come up with a system of support that is rooted in digital information and improving the competence of the labor force, not to mention the generation of associations and entities that will watch all of this within the proper legal framework. To tap the benefits of artificial intelligence for everyone's benefit, we better be aware of how critical it is to have general use of the internet and trustworthy means. We know that, for instance, on the highway, there are electronic surveillance mechanisms that we think can also be a plus, but again, used with care. We will be very interested in hearing what the countries have to say in terms of best practices as we move forward. Thank you.
Guatemala, the delegation of Brazil has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Let me greet everyone here. Pleasure to be with you today. And let me also thank the presenters of different points. They've been excellent. The technology of facial recognition as a very powerful tool by which public security can be enhanced, especially at major events with a lot of people, is a good point that we're considering. We in Brazil have many, many sports events, not to mention the famous carnival yearly, and are very much interested in ensuring that we tap these instruments for the best. However, the government recognizes that while there are complex processes and it's important to look at security, there are also elements that must be managed carefully. We know that our federal highway system uses AI, for instance, to spot people's tags, their license plates. All of this is very useful. For instance, cars that have been stolen can immediately be identified in real time. That's but one example. Since 2023, more than 6 cars were in fact identified as being stolen through that very on-the-spot and as we speak technology. It's a good instrument. The federal government also uses that body cameras with our federal police to avoid, and certainly to limit, one would hope, any abuse of police power. All of this, of course, is not lost on the state governments, and the implementation of such cameras has followed more than 650,000 reais throughout these last 6 months. The Brazilian government hopes that between now to 2027 continue using this equipment. Now, as a result of the statements that we've heard here by specialists and what our colleagues have said, we do know that while all of this sounds very attractive, there's a flip side to this, which is ethical. The collection of biometric data on a large scale has its pros and cons, very much so. Those challenges have been reiterated time and again by our own authorities in Brazil. For instance, it's difficult to, when you indiscriminately use information you've picked up from cars. In other words, you may be running afoul of certain other principles. There are algorithmic biases as well that can end up discriminating groups that are historically discriminated against to begin with. Now, disproportionately, let me say it flat out, Black populations, indigenous populations that work, that are actually what they say they are. This issue, we believe, has to be followed very carefully by academics and by civil society. And the very fact that we're holding this debate today is a good thing. Let's not stop here. Let's keep our eye on other progress that can occur and what's going on in other member states.
Brazil, I offer the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we too very much appreciate this exchange and everything that we've learned from the panelists. Colombia, for its part, recognizes that it is absolutely key to keep an eye on how the evolution and the development of digital technologies have helped in many respects fight crime. At the same time, we also recognize that there is a flip side to this set of pluses, and it is very important that we remain vigilant to ensuring that those flip sides don't lead to ongoing opportunities for criminality. The potential that is offered by artificial intelligence is huge in fighting crime, but as we say, there are also multiple opportunities where the opposite could be done. It's important to be coherent and to be ethical in our use of these technologies so that justice is served and not the contrary. And there, the public and the private sector both have a fundamental role to play. But let's face it, there are here risks involved in the undue use of these technologies, especially invasion of privacy and ruining or eroding, I should say, eroding equality before the law. Colombia believes that the recommendation on ethics regarding artificial intelligence, such as UNESCO has developed its statement, is going to be very useful in assisting us to offset possible bias and spotting lack of transparency and increasing accountability. So let us be careful to design systems that are inclusive, that are non-biased, where gender, race, religion, or any other forms of diversity are involved. The developers of artificial intelligence, therefore, have to be aware of these biases and be willing to avoid them. We think that recommendation of UNESCO, particularly with regard to the algorithmic aspect of this, is key. People have to be trained. People who are involved in this and putting it together need to be aware of the pitfalls. We think that much can be drawn for the better in the ethical and human rights standpoint. But again, I repeat, there's a flip side, and the use of bias in this regard would be regrettable.
There being no further requests for the floor, the committee thanks our distinguished guests once again for sharing their experience, knowledge, and time with us today. And the committee takes note of the interventions made by delegations. I want to apologize. I'm going to have to depart to attend to another commitment on behalf of my country, but I am leaving you in the very capable hands of Second Vice Chair Pamela Polanco of the Dominican Republic. And she will take it from agenda item number 4. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Let's move on to the next item on developing standards for international baseline standards for AI deployment and facial recognition to make sure that a balance is struck between privacy. We're going to have a presentation on the basic or fundamental baseline standards for the use of artificial intelligence and facial recognition focused on security considerations. Right after that, we're going to hold a dialogue with the delegations. For this presentation, I would like to offer the floor to Dr. Giacomo Percy Paoli, who is the head of Security and Technology Program for the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. Dr. Paoli, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me well, loud and clear. It is truly a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to brief you today on this very interesting topic. I'm Giacomo Percy Paoli. I'm the head of the Security and Technology Program at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. And I found when I received the invitation to participate in this event, I found it particularly interesting because while much of our work at UNIDIR focuses on the kind of the hard part of security, looking at the use of these technologies, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, more in the context of defense and military operations, as we are been engaging more closely with different regions of the world to discuss what does the responsible development and adoption and deployment of artificial intelligence look like. We discovered that, in fact, the line that separates concepts from security, national security, public safety is very blurred and is very context and region dependent. There are regions, there are countries and regions in the world where military forces are predominantly used domestically, for example, in the context of combating organized crime or counterterrorism, etc. So I think it is important that we look at the application of AI in a context like facial recognition for mass events that is primarily a public safety context, but that can have and has very strong national security implications, particularly if we look more closely to use cases that pertain, for example, to counterterrorism. So it is really a pleasure, excellencies and distinguished delegates, to have the opportunity to be with you today. I think it is fair to say, and we've heard and we've seen through all of the previous presentations about how the growing use of artificial intelligence in security applications raises fundamental questions about its effectiveness. It is, of course, effective, but also around accountability and human rights. AI-powered facial recognition has been already deployed with the aim of enhancing public safety, streamlining security operations, and identifying threats in real time, or at the very least, reduce to the minimum extent the lag time that goes between when a threat is potentially detected to the moment it is properly classified and identified. And when implemented responsibly, I think that AI has demonstrated tangible benefits. For example, at major events like sporting events or others, AI-enabled or driven systems have helped quickly identify persons of interest, reducing response times for security personnel. But in other cases, facial recognition has assisted, for example, in identifying or reuniting missing persons, including children with their families, and also in general, for a more kind of security perspective, it has significantly helped with crowd management. And we've seen just a very interesting presentation of Eagle AI just a few minutes ago about how really AI can help identify and predict patterns of behaviors within crowds that can lead to severe safety concerns, but also security concerns. Again, if we put all of these in the specific context of counterterrorism. However, alongside these advantages, there are, of course, concerns about accuracy, privacy, and proportionality that remain central. And addressing these concerns really requires a clear and principled approach. We already heard from my colleague at Uniqri, this idea of having principle-based approach to the development and use of these technologies. So let's go through some of the key topics that were indicated as being relevant for this group, and let's try to understand what are some of the baseline requirements or some of the standards that one may consider. We will talk later about the role that some industry groups and industry standards are starting to play in this field, because while the policy debate might be proceeding at a certain speed, industry debate is proceeding in parallel, and in many circumstances, it has actually achieved quicker consensus on what are some baseline industry standards that could be considered. But let's start with accuracy and bias prevention. And we've heard this already, so none of this is going to be new to you, but AI systems are only as effective as the data that they're trained on and the data that they're fed once they're deployed. So bias in facial recognition system has been well documented, particularly in cases where data sets are not representative of diverse populations. And inaccurate or biased AI outputs really risk not only undermining operational effectiveness of the system itself, but also undermining public trust. And when this leads to wrongful identification, of course, it has significant safety, security, and human rights considerations. And by the way, this applies to both what we call false positives, so people being flagged that shouldn't be flagged, but also false negatives, by which persons of interest or specific individuals that were supposed to be flagged somehow went undetected. So a commitment to having diverse training data sets, as well as continuous auditing and independent testing, is really key to mitigate some of these risks. We've also heard already extensively about data protection and privacy. Now, facial recognition involves the collection and processing of biometric data, as we heard already, which is one of the most sensitive forms of personal information. Now, strong safeguards must be in place to prevent not only the misuse, but also unauthorized access to this data and of this data. Compliance with national and international privacy law, such as data minimization, retention limits, and strict access control, is really critical. Another important element to consider when thinking about standards or baseline requirements is really around transparency and accountability. And we've always or often heard the term black box being associated with artificial intelligence, in the sense that most operators and sometimes even engineers themselves and programmers don't necessarily fully understand the way in which an AI system processes a certain input to achieve a certain output. Now, when it comes to deployment of AI in security settings, and this includes facial recognition, I believe it would be important that our tolerance for not understanding is really reduced to the minimum. Establishing clear oversight mechanisms, again, through independent audits, as well as other types of both technical but also policy mechanisms that can be designed in order to mitigate the risks that emerge from a black box is really important. This doesn't mean that all operators or all policymakers should suddenly become AI engineers. That's not going to happen, but that's not even the necessary or the whole purpose. However, ensuring that individuals understand the limitations of the technology that they're using if they're operators, as well as they understand when and how their biometric data is used, is a fundamental component of trustworthy AI governance. Moving to the proportionality and necessity, I think this is really, these are very strong pillars of international law. We hear them often referred to in the processes that I follow more closely, that as it relates to international humanitarian law, of course, but more in general, I think that the general concepts behind these principles is very transferable also to public safety and other national security contexts. In particular, facial recognition here should be used only when necessary and proportionate to the security risks at hand. And this means evaluating whether alternatives, potentially less intrusive security measures, could achieve the same objective. So do we really need AI? When does AI really bring added value or advantage? And let's make sure that we limit the use of AI to those specific use cases rather than having this powerful technology and then just trying to use this technology to replace other measures when potentially that's not necessarily supported by evidence. Now, deployments of this technology should be clearly justified, should be legally grounded, and also subject to regular review to assess their impact on human rights and civil liberties. This subject to regular review part, I think it's very important because the technology is changing, as well as the data that the technology can use to train itself or to be trained on is also changing, etc. So while for other systems, we have established a much more robust, tried and tested way to phase them out when they reach obsolescence or their natural end of operational utility, it is still not clear that for AI-enabled system, we have really grasped what obsolescence management looks like and how to phase out these technologies, how to identify when a certain technology has reached a moment in the life cycle in which it needs to be phased out. Now, the last 2 points I want to make, I think, are really important. One is about the cybersecurity and system integrity. There is a lot of discussion that goes into AI safety, and that is for good reasons. And AI safety in general is that field that covers all of those risks that pertain to the technology itself and how it is developed and deployed. So things about explainability, things about predictability, trustworthiness. Those are all AI safety related issues. There isn't that much emphasis that is being put on AI security, which refers more to intentional adversarial action that is conducted in order to impact the effectiveness of an AI system. So you can have a perfectly safe, from a safety standpoint, AI system, but if it is not secured, it is then vulnerable to adversarial action. And this can pose significant risks. So given the sensitivity of biometric data that facial recognition systems collect and process, cybersecurity is a core requirement for any AI-driven facial recognition system. Strong encryption, secure storage, and protection against data breaches and misuse really should be incorporated from the outset to prevent exploitation by malicious actors. And this is particularly relevant as adversarial attacks against AI-enabled recognition systems could be used to significantly alter the performance and the reliability of the system itself. For example, by saturating it with false positives, or by, in a way, altering the weights, the different weights that the system uses to categorize the individuals it detects and processes to, in a way, bias the outcome. The last point here that I would like to cover is a way of, a preparation to, I believe, what the next speaker is going to be covering, which is more about the international cooperation element. And I want to reflect on the interoperability and security cooperation component here. Now, in an increasingly interconnected world, interoperability between AI systems used for public security and public safety is critical. Interoperability both within a national government, where you may have different national agencies that are using different systems, as well as across borders. Security threats do not necessarily respect borders, and ensuring that facial recognition technologies can function seamlessly across jurisdictions while maintaining strong privacy and legal safeguards is really important. So if we consider, for example, the entire value chain that is involved in the delivery or in the use of AI systems, we can have companies that are offering AI solutions that might be based in another country than the government or the law enforcement agency that is utilizing these services. And the data may be flowing through third or fourth jurisdictions, because maybe data centers are located yet in another country. So clearly there is a jurisdictional component that needs to be taken into account, as well as kind of technical interoperability of the systems themselves. And of course, in this context, standardizing protocols for data sharing between trusted partners and enhancing cross-border law enforcement cooperation is really important, as well as establishing common security frameworks that can be used to counter transnational threats. Now, by aligning these technological capabilities and regulatory approaches, countries can really maximize the security benefits that AI brings, including through facial recognition systems, while safeguarding fundamental rights. And in conclusion, while AI-powered facial recognition is and can be a valuable tool for public security and safety, its deployment really should be responsible, transparent, and governed by clear ethical and legal standards. The challenge before us is not just how to deploy these technologies effectively, but how to do so in a manner that upholds fundamental rights and public trust. I mentioned that there are already industry standards that are being developed and used by the technology developers. And these standards cover both the facial recognition part of this discussion, as well as the AI part of this discussion. The question is, and this standardization body, whether it's the IEEE, whether it's the International Standardization Organization, or more national initiatives like the National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, there are many of these standards that have been put forward that address some of the challenges that I've mentioned, whether it's standards covering specifically data interchange formats for face image data, to ensure consistency and interoperability, whether it is about the standards for the responsible and effective use of facial recognition technology, emphasizing ethical practices and transparency, or standards about biometrics or AI development and auditing. Those standards are there. The question is, how can governments take advantage and maximum advantage of the incredible work that some of this industry group have been doing to come up with these standards that remain voluntary measures. And one way in which governments could potentially take advantage of these standards that exist is by making them mandatory requirements when you go to the market and try to procure some of these advanced technologies and capabilities. Governments have a very strong influence, or can have a very strong influence on the market, simply by taking some of these standards that are born as voluntary measures and making them requirements to be able to qualify and access government procurement opportunities. And what I'm saying is nothing new. This has already been the case in other fields, particularly in relation to cybersecurity. That's already been done, and there is no reason why this could not be extended to cover also standardization efforts that have been promoted in the field of facial recognition and AI. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paoli. Your presentation was really very interesting. The connection between benefits and the limitations on artificial intelligence that you underscored. This has to do with the use of facial recognition as well. Now, after having heard that presentation, I would like to offer the floor to the delegations who have comments they would like to make. The delegation of Peru is recognized. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Given that this is the first time I've taken the floor, we recognize the presence of Ivan Marquez, Secretary of Multidimensional Security, as well as the Executive Secretary of SIGTE, I would like to reflect on the use of AI and facial recognition in large-scale events. I would also like to thank the Secretary for Multidimensional Security for that presentation, as well as those offered by the different panelists at this session, all of which we have taken due note of. Madam Chair, Peru is committed to promote peace, security, and human rights in our region. We believe that the social impact of new emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, pose or offer an opportunity that we need to avail ourselves of urgently. It's of a matter of national interest to promote the digital talent so that we can avail ourselves of emerging technologies and new technologies in favor of economic well-being, as well as fostering the development and use of artificial intelligence to enhance public services, education, health, justice, citizen safety, digital safety, the economy, and national defense and law enforcement security, as well as any other economic social activities throughout our country. From the Secretariat of our government to digital transformation and the National System of Digital Transformation, we are currently undertaking efforts to that end. On that, we have adopted legislative measures such as the legislative decree 1412 to establish a framework of governance for digitalization, as well as a legal framework for the use of digital technology in public administration and other activities. Peru has enacted in 2023 the law 31814, which promotes the use of artificial intelligence for economic and social development in our country. Now, this seeks to promote the use of AI within the framework of the digital transformation effort, respecting human rights in order to foster socioeconomic development of our country safely, such that it's sustained a transparent, responsible, and ethical use is assured. Furthermore, it's also important for us to strike a balance between the use of artificial intelligence for security and to protect fundamental rights, such as privacy and non-discrimination. That's why it's important for us to have a sound regulatory and legal framework, and that there be ethical principles for the sustainable and proper use of AI. This, as has been said at this session, is a key regulation. There has to be human oversight, international cooperation, all of which are essential to ensure responsible use of these technologies. We also agree that artificial intelligence information and transparency in policies can be used to leverage their benefits in the public sphere. Peru reasserts its commitment to developing technologies that establish citizen safety and security without undermining fundamental rights and liberties. We think that this session is indeed a very worthwhile opportunity for us to debate on the responsible use of AI, as well as we reiterate our willingness to contribute to further dialogue region-wide to ensure that this technology puts people front and center, respecting their human rights. Thank you. Thank you, Peru. We give the floor to Panama. Madam President, or Madam Chair, rather, I thank you. Artificial intelligence represents an unprecedented opportunity for us to develop competitiveness in our countries. However, its adoption poses challenges that call for public policies that are sound, as well as international cooperation. Panama has made strides in that direction. The National Secretariat of Science, Technology, Innovation, SINACIT, is pushing through the creation of a national AI strategy in collaboration with the executive, the productive sectors, or academia, and civil society. This initiative seeks to make our country a leader in the ethical, safe, and trustworthy use of AI, promoting its use in key sectors such as education, health, agriculture, and security. Furthermore, Panama has recently signed and saw the political commitment about the responsible use of AI and autonomy in armed forces, reasserting our commitment to make ethical use of AI in keeping with international standards. Though our country has no armed forces, we do think it's important for us to take part in these agreements to promote international security and respect for human dignity. Regionally, Panama has played a leading role in international fora that seek that AI be used in a sustainable and ethical way. Recently, at the meeting of ministers and high authorities of science and technology, we underscored how important it is that certain technologies be placed at the service of our societies to close social gaps and to promote collective well-being. That's why our country backs all efforts to promote safe, trustworthy, and ethical AI in the Americas, ensuring that it strengthens rather than weakening democratic principles, human rights, and individual liberties. Thank you much. I thank you, Panama. I give the floor to the delegation of Chile. Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to start by thanking Dr. Pauli for that presentation. I take this opportunity to recognize the key role that UNIDIR plays in assisting states in creating capacities, undertaking specialized studies and programs to that end. Without a doubt, plays a key role in collaborating with this organization. We appreciate the opportunity to share our experience in developing a strategic and legal framework for artificial intelligence. We underscore key progress that has been made in data protection, regulating AI, and concrete applications of it, as well as in the public sphere, public services, and for identification purposes. The law of personal data protection of Chile, whose reform took us 7 years, precisely as we focused on emerging technologies has been key for us to ensure the right to privacy and the protection of data. This was inspired in international standards, such as the General Regulation of Data Protection of the EU. This legislation establishes principles such as transparency, informed consent, security, or safety of that information. It also creates the Personal Data Protection Agency, charged with overseeing compliance with this set of standards, governing emerging technologies, face recognition, and AI, respecting fundamental rights of people. Regarding strategic development of AI, Chile has carried out or established a policy roadmap focused on 3 key pillars: enabling factors, infrastructure development, and the adoption of AI, as well as governance and regulation. This approach seeks to strike a balance between innovation and competitiveness, safeguarding ethics and bias prevention by training people, public-private cooperation, and strengthening cybersecurity, ensuring the use of AI that it be aligned with democratic principles and key fundamental rights. We have used it in creating passports and IDs, strengthening security and biometric identification in any identification process. AI technology enables us to ensure precise or accurate face recognition, avoiding fraud for audits and protection of personal data, as the system was also done in cooperation with international organizations, making sure that it be interoperable with global security standards for migration purposes, for example. This also is owing to challenges we faced in ID efforts. All of our states are currently rolling out and assessing different ID means. Now, we have a draft law regulating AI. This draft law regulates the transparent explainability and fairness and the transparency of AI use, preventing unacceptable use such as real-time unsupervised biometric identification, and also unconsented biospatial or geospatial information being used, to avoid algorithms being biased or misused, many of the things we have talked about here that we have included in our draft law. Now, internationally speaking, Chile has taken part actively, for example, in the recent AI Safety Summit carried out in France, asserting our commitment with responsible governance of AI, underscoring the importance of establishing global cooperation in security and different models used for AI. At that venue, Chile stressed the need to strengthen shared cooperative frameworks to strengthen transparency and ensure inclusive use of AI, its development to avoid negative impacts among vulnerable populations. Chile, together or with the backing of experts, organizations, and research centers of Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, US, Spain, Peru, and Uruguay, through its National Center of Artificial Intelligence, CENIA centers, which have been certified as a center of excellence by the OAS, announced the launching of the GPT chat for July this year, an optimized version of this technology, 3.5, equivalent to 3.5 version of ChatGPT, which poses an opportunity for us to strengthen AI tools adapted to cultural contexts in Latin America. This progress enables us to push through this transformation, education, and innovation of technology, making responsible use of AI with a ethics and equity, human rights focus. We represented our region in different global encounters. Chile continues working to consolidate an ecosystem of safe, transparent, and inclusive AI, where technology fosters development without undermining rights through international cooperation to ensure AI serve humanity and respects people's rights.
Delegación de Chile. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Chile. Mexico is recognized. Thank you, Chair. What a pleasure to see you in the chair. And let me also applaud what was said by the representative of VIVIR and express how very much we appreciate that support in this organization. Mexico, Madam Chair, fully recognizes the increasing relevance of artificial intelligence in so many different areas, not least public security. The application of technologies such as facial recognition, particularly in mass events, offers a perfect opportunity to enhance security. We all agree. However, privacy, human rights, and governance are a different matter. Give me just a second, says the chair. Says the delegate, I beg your pardon. And all of this flows from the change of government, which just happened in Mexico. There have been a number of reforms taken to increase the legal framework within the Mexican institutional framework. And once this is seen through, we will be able, we hope, to have Mexico agree to two key agreements that have been adopted in Europe. One is the protocol for the defense of persons who need to have their personal data respected, as well as to the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law, which was approved in 2024. These instruments offer very basic guidelines and fundamental, really important guidelines as to how AI should be used. These are aligned with human rights, transparency, and other such key concepts that are absolutely essential with regard to the use of advanced technology in public security. But Mexico also recognizes Resolution 78265, which was adopted by consensus at the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 2nd of March of 2024, that speaks to trustworthy and equitable information technology, as well as information with regard to the ethics of the use on the use of AI that was developed by UNESCO last March. It's critical to have robust technology, but also certainly strong governance that will regulate that use in all sectors. Now, Mexico considers that to be able to participate is in this thought, in this particular forum, is a very good thing, because it allows us to put our heads together and consider how AI can enhance public security, national security, and international security. Going by regional security shortly is key. This is how we can maximize the benefits that are offered to everyone's benefit. Thank you. Thank you, Mexico. Doesn't seem to be anybody else needing the floor, and so let us thank our distinguished guest for the presentation, and be assured we have noted all of the statements that we have heard. So, dear colleagues, representatives, experts, today's experts have certainly underscored the potential risks as well as the great advantage that flows from the use of AI and public security as they meet. When we've seen this used properly, the security efforts can be greatly enhanced. The public order can be very much buttressed. This is great, particularly for events that are large scale. However, accountability and the respect for human rights must continue to be the heart and soul of any use of AI. That is our strong feeling, as everyone has expressed it one way or another. And to that end, we can only continue to put our heads together regionally and watch carefully as to how this matter advances. Many member states have expressed their great interest in continuing to look for solutions rooted in AI at the same time as they understand the importance of sharing information at the practical level, and also from the standpoint of a framework of basic rules to follow. The OAS is in a perfect position to assist us all around, not least because of the exchanges that we can and must have with experts and international organizations. Now, as we look forward, let's keep our eye on how we can strengthen our own governance as it connects with AI, at the same time developing guidelines for the responsible use of the same. That would include tapping different opportunities for training, for a better understanding of the impact here that always follows international frameworks. It is that way we seem to believe that we can ensure that the use of AI respects the rule of law. And I thank all of you for the light you have shed on each one of these aspects. Thank you for being here. Thank you for speaking up. This dialogue is not at an end, need I tell you. So let's keep at it. Let's watch to see how the useful and responsible and ethical use of AI continues in our hemisphere. Nobody else is asking for the floor, so the meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.